Hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that has been very widely discussed yet doesn't have a certain answer. This topic is, x divided by 0, where x represents any integer. So over here, what is x divided by 0? Well, if you think about it, it doesn't actually make sense because when you're dividing a number by something, you are sorting the number into groups, such as if someone has 6 apples and you have to sort those 6 apples between 2 friends, then you divide the 6 apples by 2. So 6 divided by 2 gives us 3. But then let's say you have 1 chocolate bar. And then you have to separate that 1 chocolate bar with 0 friends. Well, that doesn't really make sense because then you're dividing 1 by 0. And how do you divide 1 by 0? So this is a very complicated question. So that is what we're going to be talking about today. So as we thought about it, what is x divided by 0? Well, there are many answers to this, but the commonly accepted answer is undefined. Well, what does undefined mean? Well, pretty obviously it means something that hasn't been defined. But what do you mean it hasn't been defined? Well, many people say that x divided by 0 is equals to infinity. And we're going to be talking about how this would make sense. So there are 2 ways to saying that x divided by 0 gives us infinity. So proof 1, let's say we had, so we know that multiplication is, obviously, repeated addition. So then, because if we are multiplying a number by something, we're adding that number that many times. So 2 times 3 is the same thing as 2 plus 2 plus 2. So then is division repeated subtraction? Now, if you think about this actually makes sense because when you're dividing a number, you're practically taking that number from the other number as many times as you have to make the number 0. So let's say, like in our previous example, 6 divided by 2 is the same thing as 6 minus 2 minus 2 minus 2, which gives us 0. So we can think about it this way, that 1 divided by 0, over here, I should write x divided by 0. Over here, x divided by 0, where we say x is equals to 1, so 1 divided by 0 is 1 minus 0 minus 0 minus 0, as many times as it takes to get us 0. But no matter how many times we subtract 0 from 1, we still get 1. So that's why we write x divided by 0 as infinity. So x divided by 0 would be infinity because even if we subtract 0 by 1 in infinite times, we would still get the number 1. Now let's talk about our second proof. So over here, let's think about it a practical way. 1 divided by 1 would give us 1. 1 divided by 0.1 gives us 10. 1 divided by 0.01 gives us 100. 1 divided by 0.001 gives us 1,000. Now, if we continue like this, at some point, we're going to get a really, really, really small number. 0.0000000 and it would go on for a long time. And we would call this 0. So 1 divided by 0 gives us infinity, because the more smaller we go, the larger our answer. So we can say that 1 divided by 0 gives us infinity. But when we talked about it earlier, x divided by 0 is undefined, not 0. So this doesn't make sense. How can it not be 0? Well, that's because the next thing we're going to be talking about is why this proof doesn't make sense. So we've talked about how 1 divided by 0 gives us infinity. Then we can also say that 2 divided by 0 would also give us infinity, because we can check this using our other methods that we just used. 2 divided by 0.1 gives us 20. 2 divided by 0.01 gives us 200. We go on, and 2 divided by 0 would also give us infinity. So 2 divided by 0 is equals to infinity. And our other way, 2 minus 0 minus 0 minus 0 minus 0, no matter how many times we go, we get 2. So 2 divided by 0, again, gives us infinity. So can't we write it this way? That since 1 divided by 0, or I should write this as a fraction, 1 divided by 0 gives us infinity, which is the same thing as 2 divided by 0. And if we think about it this way, then 1 must be equal to 2, which is not true because 1 and 2 are not equal. So x divided by 0 cannot be infinity. If that isn't enough proof for you, then there is another way we can show that x divided by 0 is not infinity. If we take the number, like in this method, where we went down from 1 divided by 0.1 to 1 divided by 0, we're going smaller and smaller. So we go from 1 divided by 0.1, then 1 divided by 0.01, then 1 divided by 0.001, and then finally 1 divided by 0. So can't we go up the same way? Well, yes, we can, because 1 divided by negative 0.1 gives us negative 10. 1 divided by negative 0.1 gives us negative 100. 1 divided by negative 0.001 gives us negative 1,000. Now, we can see which way this is going, so we can also say that 1 divided by 0 would give us negative infinity. But how is that possible? Because as we know, negative infinity and positive infinity are on entirely different sides of our number line. If our 0 is over here, then negative infinity is here and infinity is here. So how can they be the same answer except on polar opposite sides of our number line? Well, this is the reason why we say that x divided by 0 is undefined. It's not like mathematicians were lazy and they didn't want to figure out what x divided by 0 is. They tried and tried, but the thing is, they couldn't find an answer for it because each time they tried to get an answer, they would get entirely different and random numbers. So this is why x divided by 0 is undefined and not infinity. Or in this case, we could also write or negative infinity. So let's go through that one more time. X divided by 0 is undefined and not infinity. Why? Well, the reasons why people thought that it was infinity is because x, any number, division is basically repeated subtraction. And if you take away 0 from any number or integer, you still get your original integer. That is why x divided by 0 is infinity, people believed. Their other reasoning was that if you tried going down from 1 divided by 1 to 1 divided by 0.01, you went all the way to a really, really, really small number, which we can say was approximately 0, you got infinity. So that is why people, again, thought 1 divided by 0 or x divided by 0 was infinity. But then they also thought that if 1 divided by 0 gives us infinity, then shouldn't 2 divided by 0 also give us infinity? Well, that's where they went wrong, because then they realized that if if 2 and 1 both divided by 0 gave us infinity, then that means 1 must be equal to 2, which is not true and breaks the laws of math. So that is why people came up with a negative infinity and a positive infinity. That is where they started to get the answer of negative infinity and positive infinity. But since that made absolutely no sense, people came up with a conclusion that x divided by 0 is undefined. So I hope this video helped and cleared your doubts about any number being divided by 0. If this helped, be sure to drop a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.